M. The Media Project. Imagine a vibrant region that embraces innovative technology and systems, allowing individuals and businesses to grow and thrive within the natural and cultural lifestyle of Vermont. Imagine the Black River Innovation Campus. Our community includes business and technology programming, co-working and technology tools, and other exciting experiences that are quickly creating an outsized impact to our little corner of northern New England here in Springfield, Vermont. PC Mag rates Springfield, Vermont number 8 for the best work-from-home cities in the U.S. Join us in Vermont. Begin your journey at bricvt.org.
And we are live with the Interchain Live channel. This is Ryan Munn, and we're recording today for Interchain Live and possibly with my co-host, definitely with my co-host, Scott Graves, possibly to put out with the Are We Here Yet podcast.
Hey, man, I'm here in the flesh. I'm a definite, not a possibility. Although I'm full of possibilities, so my mom told me a long time ago.
Absolutely. And so we'll get this out to our audience, at least in one, if not more, channels. And today we have a special guest to share some very interesting insight and experience in the business of writing books, and in particular, having written his own and ghostwritten combined over 100 books to date. So a very impressive collection out there. We have Richard Lowe Jr. on with us today. Richard, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. It's a great Tuesday.
Absolutely. Excellent. So just to get us kicked off, why don't you give us a little bit more background of kind of your professional adventure and what brought you to ghostwriting all those years ago?
Well, it's been quite a maze of twisty passages. And if you recognize that, you're as old as me. It's from a game named Zork. That was the first computer game, one of the first computer games.
Oh, nice.
As you're stuck in a maze of twisty passages all alike. Anyway, back in when I was 17 years old, I wanted to meet my grandfather. Everybody said stay away from him. I said, no, I'm going to go meet him. So I sat down and talked to him, and I learned all kinds of fascinating things. He was an World War II vet, in the Yangtze River Patrol, captured on Bataan, Bataan Death March, spent 4 years in POW camps. I wrote him a book. And that was my first book. We never published it. It's been since lost. But I learned about my grandfather before he passed away, and I learned a lot of interesting things, and I respected the hell out of him after that. And you know what? After what he went through, he can be as difficult as he wants to be here in the right. And then life got in the way, family, job, had to move out, all kinds of stuff. So I went into tech. And I became a VP of a company, then a VP of another company, and then settled in at Trader Joe's as the director of computer operations for 20 years. And about almost within a month of my 20th anniversary there, I said, I'm done. And I left Trader Joe's and started my own business. Drove to Florida, and there's a whole brand adventure involved with all that. We can talk about later if you want. And started playing with different ways to make money. One of them was writing. Writing worked out okay. Did affiliate marketing, sold on eBay, all the usual stuff. And then when it fell into ghostwriting, and I ghostwrote a book I started with a ghostwriting company, and he paid me a whole $1,000 to write a book about an Afghani politician who was the guy who built all the roads in Afghanistan before the Soviets invaded, before the Taliban even existed.
Oh, wow.
So I got to write his book. He never did finish it, but I had to do 16 hours of interviews through a translator before he flew to Afghanistan to do something. So it was interesting. I had to learn Muslim culture and Afghani culture and all kinds of things that were totally foreign. So I had a blast.
Cool.
I did 2 more books. And then I said, you know what? I can make more than $1,000 on a book. This is pitiful. I said, I'm going to start my own company. My boss said, you don't know how to do this. You're going to starve. Very, very supportive. Sarcasm intended. So I went off, and within 2 days, I had $25,000 worth of books. Wow. Never looked back. The first book that I wrote on my own created, the guy wanted to get the notice of the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. The CEO wound up writing the forward. He got promotions. He got raises. Went on the speaking circuit, $5,000 to $10,000 a pop for speeches, and then went to get venture capital and got 30 mil from my book. How I wish I had a different contract with him.
And you didn't benefit from the venture capital.
No, I didn't. I get paid up front, and any other royalties or anything go to the author. The author's them, the clients. The author's the client. I'm the writer. Just to get the terminology right. So he got all that. Was very happy, and then I've written 51 more books since then, and ghostwritten 51 more books, and 63. I just finished the 64th book of my own.
Of your own. Wow, that's an impressive library you've generated there.
Yep, loads of fun.
Yeah. So what are some of the books, or what's the range of books that you've written yourself as the author?
The most recent one is called The Ghostwriting Advantage, and it's being released on April 15th. And it's about, from the client side, how do you find a ghostwriter? What kind of ghostwriter do you want? What are all the steps involved? It's actually very large because there's a lot to it. All the publishing steps, everything that you need to know. I'll probably make a Cliff Notes version also.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be beneficial. And then I'll do the usual lead magnets and stuff from that.
It's an essential thing, isn't it? That we learn so much. Everybody learns differently. Everybody's intellectual self is slightly different. But one thing that I don't think there's anybody that you can say doesn't learn by storytelling, right? The stories that we tell each other. And so I just can't think of anything more essential. When I hear from folks, I just don't read. And I can understand one's ability to read can be compromised, or some of us, it's easier to read than others. But it's the storytelling part of that I find so how do you intake unless you're telling stories and having stories told to you, how are you learning and experiencing one another? That it's it seems to be one of the most essential of human things.
Well, I focus on the storytelling and the emotions of the person who's writing it. The passion is where I focus. So I do a whole series of questions at the beginning of a project, and Socratic method, basically, where I'm asking question, and getting the answers. And from there, I put together kind of a profile of the person and what he or she believes, and what they want to do, and their passion and their heart. I borrow their heart for a while. I do get the back later. And that's what goes in the book. That's what makes the book really readable. That's what makes the bestseller, is the passion is there. If there's no passion, there's no why read it. But if there's and then that boils down to stories. As you say, it's very important to have all the stories, or as many of the stories as you can get. Stories of failure are very important to make the person more human. Stories of success, stories of, all the stories that you can find, both human and business. We're going to throw some humanity in there. Like maybe the business, person had a choice between business and going to a wedding, so he chose the wedding. Get some humanity in there. And that is the key to a good ghostwriter versus a mediocre ghostwriter, and even further down the chain versus AI, is a good ghostwriter, a premium ghostwriter, gets that passion into the book.
Is that process also important from the standpoint of, I've got to imagine for you, the writer, the ghostwriter, the single hardest thing to do is to unlock enough of that other person's voice that their own voice comes through in the book. So I just wonder if your process helps you to do that, or if that's even a priority for you.
It is a priority because that's what their attention is on first. Usually, will you get my voice? And what they mean is everything I just said, plus the way they speak. I had one client who he cursed a lot. I mean, a lot. He's a sailor's mouth, worse than a sailor's mouth. So I said, "Do you want the that's in the book?" And he said, "Oh, it's expletive, yes." And I said, "Okay." And then I did what he said, and then he read the book and he said, "Let's tone it down just a little bit." But I get the voice of the client or author as much as possible, and we do a round of like 3 or 4 pages around and around and around until I get that right, and then I can write the rest of the book with that voice.
It's like the literary version of a painted portrait versus the photograph.
Yeah.
Let's clean up some of the wrinkles.
And it's even the difference between a photograph taken by anybody and a photograph taken by a pro. Look at wedding pictures. Wedding pictures by a pro wedding photographer are far different than pictures taken by the general public.
100%.
Which is why they make lots of money, because they're good at it.
So what makes a bestseller these days?
The passion and a little bit of luck and a lot of promotion.
Yeah.
The passion has to come through. The story has to be good. There has to be something people want. There has to be something in the current environment that makes it that people catch on. Vampires caught on it for a while. Now they're pretty much passé. AI is catching on big now. In a few months, once there's something called the hype cycle, where something new technology comes out and it goes way up. Everybody put money into it. Everybody, this is a new big thing. Eventually it collapses because it's not as clear as everybody thought. And it goes back to a normal. It doesn't get to the bottom, but it goes back to a normal. And you saw that with the cloud. You saw all kinds of things. AI is about to do that. Don't kill me, AI people.
Yeah. I mean, how much are people, I guess, there's writing about AI, but then there's also folks writing with AI. How much has that impacted your business now? I mean, are people coming to you with more content and more material to get started? You get more of a sort of a boost from what you can get out?
Some are. Most aren't. Most want to avoid AI. That's not why they're hunting me down. They don't want anything to do with it. I had one client who came to me with just reams and reams and reams of IA-generated garbage, and had to basically incorporate that as best I could. And it was way overwhelming, and it was pretty poor. And from now on, if AI comes to me, I'll just say, we're not using it. That's not why I'm here. You want to write with AI, go for it. We're done. Yeah. You don't want to write with AI. If you want a human there, we're going to get started. But I don't want your AI outlines. I don't want your AI stuff. It's garbage. It's tolerable for the low end. You want to write a quick article for LinkedIn. AI is great. You want to write a book? You're not going to get the passion in it.
Yeah, we've actually on this on the Innovato2 podcast, we've talked a lot about artificial intelligence. We'll continue to talk a lot about artificial intelligence. 2 years ago, I first published podcasts and essays and looked at it from a variety of different ways. One thing as a person who started off, my chosen profession was in the arts, and as an intellectual self, am a artist first, right? What concerns me most, and I'm wondering, you must have some thoughts on this, is its long-term consequences. First off, do we all agree that human behavior, it is absolutely innate in us to express ourselves creatively in as many different ways as possible to each other, right? It's just, it's one of those fundamental human behaviors, whether we suppress it in ourselves or not.
Right.
It's still a need, right?
Yes.
And so if we agree with that, I wonder what the long-term consequences are of it's not that AI is new in this way. It's just accelerating what's been going on for a very long time, which is between what I would call the commodification of artistic expression. Like we got to a certain point in the last, quarter century or so, where after first having commodified things like popular music and a lot of writing, right? We then we dehumanized it, right? It became content. And in the digital age, that made it possible for people to say, I have no interest in buying your music, as an example. I'll buy a t-shirt from you as a consequence of going to your concert and getting the music for free, or getting a download for free, right? Like, why am I going to pay for this when I know I can just go on the internet and get it for free? That the next logical step to that has been to literally aggregate the visual, audio, or written artistic expression of billions of people and not pay them for it.
Yep.
Right. That's one of the things we've really dealt with at the Innovato 2 podcast is, well, with all this investment going into AI, surely we can create a model that pays the artists that are now just literally at a frightening and exasperating rate being stolen from every day. And but also, what are its consequences to us as it, one version of the future I see is the possibility that for the vast majority of people, we penultimately suppress any, even though it's innate in us, the need to express ourselves artistically. I mean, in fact, giving up all that agency, and people will assume at a very young age that the artistic expression is generated. There's always the machine doing it. And that is the accepted practice, that in fact it becomes the unique or largely unacceptable practice of the expression coming from the human, that the human expression becomes the imperfect, the dirty, the gross, right? Versus the cleansed version a machine can come up with.
Right. Well, a lot of what you said is solved when NFTs become really big. Then artists will have an NFT that says they own this piece of art. And then the NFT has built into its smart contracts that then give them the royalties and things based on that. That's not widely rolled out yet, but as NFTs and smart contracts become more popular, that's blockchain stuff, then that problem will reduce, because all of these things that everybody creates should and will have an NFT, hopefully have an NFT associated with it that makes it all behind the scenes. And if you don't have an NFT associated with it, you're basically saying it's public domain in the future, because you don't have any way to enforce it. Brian, you're muted.
I think you're muted, Ryan.
Yeah. Ideally, we can restore provenance, right? And that's what you're alluding to, Scott, when you talk about, we're pulling the systems at play, the machines are pulling all this content and then generating it as if it's its own. And the reality is that it came from somewhere. And what we're lacking in the current paradigm is the actual track and trace mechanism to connect those dots back to the original source and give people an opportunity to at least attempt to engage with the authentic sources of the things, the art, the expression that they're interested in.
Well, yeah, my take is we already live in a world. We just have disrespected it for about 30 years or so. But we already live in a world of blanket licensing. And this has been around for 110 years or so, maybe even a little more. So, the financial model is already there. It's about applying it to the digital realm through the NFT. And the other part of this, which is a little harder to pin down, but I think is a worthy thing, and the way to deal with it or work with it is for smart people at every level of society to constantly be talking about it and getting other people to think about it, which is, what consequences does this have on our giving up our agency as creative beings to technology? And can it ever get to a point where it's actually literally psychologically unhealthy? And I only say that because, I'm not a professional musician any longer, and I haven't been for some time, but I still consider myself as a musical artist. So much of my head when I'm awake, and sometimes when I'm not, is still spent writing, arranging, experiencing, being on stage and playing music for others. Seriously, it's like a major part of who I am, right? Whether you know that or not, right? But so what happens when people have never had the experience over decades of doing it, right? And their whole lives have been spent, I have to be creative right now. I got to go to the bot. What are its consequences on us? Again, that storytelling is not only a function of artistic expression, but the artistic expression is really about how we know each other, how we know ourselves. It's a fundamental mechanism of being human, right?
What happens when AI is actually plugged into your brain? Then it becomes even more intimate, and they're working on that.
What do you think about that? What happens next?
There's a couple of routes that could happen next. Number one, blockchain could finally become widely accepted and could resolve this problem of ownership pretty well. But I think that's a long shot, because there are billions and hundreds of billions of pieces of content out there that aren't on any of that, and they're never going to be. So there's that problem. New stuff, there's that problem. I think that, I run into it all the time, and especially the low-end ghostwriters run into it all the time. What about, or just plain freelance writers, or I'm sure other artists, what about AI? And it cuts out the low end, and they either have to use AI to survive, or they won't survive, because they can't survive at the rates that they can do with AI. And I could spit out an article in AI in 5 minutes, and even edit it probably another 15. And handwriting, and I can't do that. And, a book, but it's not going to be very good. But of course, it's just a matter of time before it is actually good. It's probably a few years out. It's going to be an interesting world. But I didn't predict mobile phones. Nobody did it. There is nobody on the planet that predicted mobile phones 40 years ago, other than the Dick Tracy phone, on the wrist. But nobody predicted everybody would have a supercomputer in their hands. And that's changed society dramatically. You see people just wandering around with their phone in their hand in front of their face all day long, even while they're driving. Just idiotic, I think. And they're shopping and they're talking on the phone, and all this stuff. It's changed society, and AI is the next level over that. I do all my shopping online now, and it pretty much picks things out in advance and says, "You want this stuff?" And I say, "Sure." It's interesting.
It's living in a time where the technology, we've become so good at creating disruptive technology, to use a 21st century term, that we really got to start asking, like, okay, how is the implementation of this technology best suited to society in a positive way? Or even, do we implement, and if we do implement, how?
Driven by data. Driven by technology. Driven by community development. Driven by the need to get results for your project. SM Graves Associates. Delivering real estate development to you, including project management and pre-development services, with a keen focus on delivering community-oriented projects. We build profitable projects that respond to the needs of your neighborhood. Join the SMG family. Find us at smgravesassociates.com.
Before AI, the example we'd often use is, self-driving vehicles. Okay, so what are its consequences to traffic, to urban planning, to urbanism, right? How can an autonomous vehicle best be used? How would it be implemented? How would humans truly interact with it? What would be the financial model? As an example, if we replace 350,000 or so truckers, that's our trucking fleet in the United States, with self-driving trucks, can we build into that financial model the funding of the next step for those truckers, right? As opposed to, they'll find a better future eventually, which is the way we usually, for the first 200 years of technology, we've implemented technology, right? Like, there's this far off time called the future that'll be better, right? Well, how about we incorporate that into the way we transition into new technology? We've never done that before, and it would be interesting now, I think, and more important. This is a time period where that could be particularly important,
Well, I've led digital transformation projects, and digital transformation projects virtually always fail unless they have one thing in it, and that's called cultural transformation. You have to transform the culture to accept the digital and to be part of it. And part of that cultural transformation is your job's going to be obsolete. What do we do about that? Well, we retrain you, we retire you, we put you in a different position. Whatever the solution is, that has to be part of the model. Or number one, you're going to be sabotaged by your people and they're not going to get it. And you're probably going to fail. And that's probably one of the core reasons why a lot of digital transformation projects fail. I've written books on that. In fact, I wrote a paper on exactly the case study that you just said with the truckers. By the way, it's 350,000 truckers that get replaced. And then you got the forklift operators and all the other things. I mean, forklifts are already using autonomous, because forklifts are relatively easy to program. It's already using autonomous stuff. And look at autonomous drones. But when you throw malicious actors into the mix who like want to cause damage to a country, then you get a whole different problem, different mix of problems, where not only are you getting all of the change, but you're getting some maliciousness thrown in there. And that's a different problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know in my experience in implementing digital transformation, one of the key factors was hiring a new person or two to fulfill a role that directly contributed to the change in the workflow or the process.
Right.
And that sounds good. Like, great, we're hiring more people and maybe people more technical or digitally savvy. But at the end of the day, that role was simplified by the technology. And what ultimately happened in that experience was those lower paying roles increased. And we had more people doing that low paid work because we were able to take on more volume, while we had less people doing the high paid work because they also were able to take on more volume and make more money for the company. But the net result was that distribution of employee wages, became overall less for a more productive work environment, because the technology made it all more profitable, made us Americans more productive, but the value didn't necessarily go to the people.
Yeah. If you want to look at somebody who really uses automation, well, that's Japan, because they have a declining demographic. So they don't have a choice. Either they die as a country or as a people. It actually is a race. They're depopulating very fast, or they put in automation. Yeah, that's all very interesting. Digital transformation. I've actually done 2 of them, and it led them. And it's an interesting problem. We were successful, but it was quite tumultuous because we didn't even think about cultural transformation. I've written 3 books on the subject now, and it gets pretty deep. But you have to use a certain amount of what is the AI for? Like a factory. Hey, just throw, manufacturing, it's great for running factories and things and building cars. You don't need a lot of people for that. That's what technology is great for. But then you have people like me, or people like you probably. I use AI as a digital assistant. In many ways, it replaces a virtual assistant in some ways it doesn't. And I have it do things for me, like take this transcript and break it up. Tell me what I said, because sometimes an hour-long conversation can be very confusing. Try and figure it out. And it takes 2 hours to go through the transcript. AI will do it in 1 minute and say, okay, now show me what my commitments were. Okay, good. Show me what their commitments were. Okay, fine, good. Show me the timeline we agreed on. Okay. Just a simple transcript becomes 5 minutes work instead of taking laborious notes and things. I don't even have to take notes anymore. It does it for me. Although I was kind of screwed when I didn't get the transcript once.
And that seems to me the most readily available and positive use of any form of personal artificial intelligence, personal interaction with artificial intelligence, I should say. Is that it sort of like what my buddy Dominic refers to as creating bionic workers, right? So that we can focus more of our time on the true stuff that takes a lot of intellectual capability, by getting rid of the mundane. There's something I want to, I'm thinking about how I want to form the question. You mentioned you wrote 3 books on the Soviet Union,
digital transformation. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, on digital transformation. And I wonder, Well, so I wonder, uh, that coupled with all the other, subject matter that you've written about, I mean, you've had plenty of time to think about this, right? So what are some of the other holes in the way that we are laying out new technology that could be better or that could benefit society more than it already does?
The biggest hole that we have in most projects with most corporations, and I'm saying most loosely, is they consider technology first because they put technology in charge of the IT department. IT, what does IT do? It's technology.
Yeah.
Digital transformation should be done by a business unit, and IT is a sub-function of that. And business units think differently than IT, or they have different goals and different purposes. And that's what an IT department will do is say, what sexy new technology can we get? And what the business department is going to say is, how do we solve this problem in the least amount of money and so forth? And you're going to come up with a whole different solution and a whole different scenario. That's the biggest problem that we have is actually not understanding what technology is for and getting it out of the hands of the technologists. I know, don't shoot me, technologists out there. You're still involved and you're still going to need new technology. It's just not the front end. It's the back end. Use people, processes, and technology in that order. People come first, processes second, technology third. Are you going to need the new sexy new technology? Probably, but only after you consider the other two things.
There's that idea of agency again, right? We have to have agency over the technology, not give away all our agency, to a machine.
Well, it just becomes some vendor walks in with this new, wonderful, cute machine that you want to buy. Doesn't mean that's the right solution, and you shouldn't do your whole digital transformation effort around that. Instead, think of the problem you're trying to solve. And then think of it's not a fact, but think of it this way. You want to have digital employees and regular employees, human employees, and you mix them. I've got a digital employee. It's an assistant, and it's ChatGPT, and it works for me, and it does things for me. Please don't kill me, ChatGPT. Don't mean you're a slave. Sometimes I think of it as almost human. That's a digital employee, and you give your accountants digital employees, and you basically hire them to do things for you. Somebody gave me a digital employee the other day that's going to remake my LinkedIn to be better. That's a digital employee, and if you think of it that way, it becomes a bit easier to conceptualize. You're not replacing people; you're adding components to help them.
Those bionic workers.
Well, digital, they're usually not physical, but yeah, they could be physical.
Yeah. It is a world I'd like to see us realize. When I was in school at the end of the 90s, mid to late 90s, everywhere you looked, every publication, Harvard, in the Globe, everywhere you looked, in the Times, everyone was talking about how this new generation for the 21st century, it's all going to be about, you got to be a good problem solver. You have to be creative, right? They're interviewing kids coming out of Harvard and they got to put Lego things together. And based on what they did, that's who got the job. And all that went like that. Mm-hmm. The dot-com bubble in the first couple of years of the 2000s, all of a sudden, and since then, it's all been about, scarcity and, just you alluded earlier to an increase in low wage jobs and a decrease in, higher wage work and net and high. And I'll say as a business owner, the high net margin opportunities, regardless of what it is you sell, have been reduced significantly. There's really two industries left in North America that are high net margin: landfill management and apparently artificial intelligence. And even that is really just an advance on your future.
There's another problem that's happening is we're in a demographic problem right now. People are getting older and there's less people being born. So we're actually in an upside down pyramid, and it's really bad in some countries like China and so forth. Yeah. But the problem that leads to is the older people are retiring, and that's causing a capital crunch. It's not the capital crunch is not caused by what people think it is, caused by retirees who are taking the money out of investments and spending it because, they're not going to be around much longer. Or they want to use it. So it's causing a lot of ageism, to be quite frankly, quite in your face. These older employees know the systems. Did you know I heard a statistic the other day that 70% of computers are programmed in COBOL. Still, that's banks.
Yeah.
Financial.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
They're not using AI, so they're using COBOL. I mean, that's what I learned in school, COBOL and Fortran. So these older employees are very, very necessary. And a lot of us older employees are working well beyond the retirement age because why not? And, life gets extended and bills need to be paid and stuff like that. And who's going to trust Social Security nowadays? So,
Well, and frankly, a lot of people have lost a lot of their, a lot of people lost most of the value in their retirement savings after '08. And a lot of that hasn't been recovered. And at the same time, they've stayed in homes longer than they thought they would.
Yep.
Because of the varying issues within the housing ecosystem. And so you got this dual sort of, I don't have quite enough to retire on. My house isn't quite as worth as much as I thought it would be. And for a lot of folks, it's really, even if they wanted to retire, that kind of ship has sailed for a while, for a little while.
Besides, they still feel pretty good. They're 60, 70, even 80 years old, and they still feel like they can produce. And I think that there's a large number of untapped resources there in the older population that are strongly prejudiced against. Like, use the older people. They know what they're doing. They've been through all this stuff, and they'll accept lower pay. They'll not necessarily entry level pay, but they'll come in and do the job if they want to work. And you'll find out if you do that you have experienced employees that you don't have to train. Maybe a little bit on some of the more advanced stuff. They can work with the younger people who are coming out of college and things and help train them and help bring them up to speed, and pass on that knowledge, because it's becoming a real problem that there aren't a lot of COBOL programmers anymore. Yeah. Real problem. And Ada and things like that. Those languages are dying.
You speak to a kind of like a change in the overall culture of the workplace in that, and before I say that, I know just as many people that are younger, published journalists that are saying the ageism is the opposite, that we are a geriatric nation because the boomers are demographically the majority. And so therefore we've created a society that's slowly bankrupting itself because it's paying for all the old people and doing nothing for young people. But isn't the fact that every age group, no matter where you are, it's very easy to sort of posit yourself against the other groups? Like, what if this was an environment where we all started to work together, just as you're describing, rather than seeing the differences, you know what I mean, and pitting ourselves one against the other?
Well, you actually named two different problems there. One is the older people. They still want to work. You've got the younger people who are looking for work. There's a point at which we can all get along. And then if you recognize that reference, that's kudos to you. There's a point at which we could all work together. Older people want to work, and they don't want to be favored necessarily, but they don't want to work at a Walmart greeter.
Right. Exactly.
Younger people want to work, and hey, you can hire these older people to train the younger people and bring in the new generation.
Yeah.
And stop having the ageism. I mean, it's it's not so much that you're prejudiced against old people, you're losing a valuable talent.
Right.
And we have a job shortage in the United States right now, a big one. It's huge. And it's going to get much, 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 much worse because the younger generations aren't producing as many offspring. So that also means we're going to be capital poor in the next 20 years or so.
Yeah.
So you need to take advantage of these people who are willing to work. Probably don't need the rate. Don't need the amount of income that the younger people do, and you can work together.
Yeah. And well, speaking of things that are innately human, we are communal, regardless of the mythology of the individual. But we're communal, and we need not just within our nuclear families, but we need the interaction that comes from the wisdom of people who have been around longer than us. There's great care you feel, for one, when you're working with folks and having that kind of lifetime wisdom imparted on you. Yeah. It's healthy,
Yeah, I know I've often felt that there's a strong need for a better apprenticing model in our work and educational culture, and the idea of having sort of universal mechanism for carrying and conveying credentials as we go through our academic and professional careers. There's a huge lack in that. And part of it's because things have become so complex, but we have these digital tools to bring that to a method of simply, who knows what I can do? Why is their opinion valid? Because they've proven that they know what they can do, and being able to convey that in a simpler format and make the job market a little more fluid, I think, in terms of conveying knowledge, imparting knowledge, sharing opportunity, and rising tide floats all boats, right?
Well, there's even a bigger problem in that life ages are being extended. People live longer. And by the time 10 years pass, our life expectancy is probably in at least 150 years. And that's the problem we're talking about now becomes a much bigger problem.
Yeah.
These 150 years of somebody who doesn't, there's no social security program in the world that's going to take care of that. Now, where you've got that many people in social security. In fact, you'll undermine your society very fast. So you need to put the older people to work, and they want to work. Yeah. Most people enjoy working. They like working at good jobs, not toxic jobs, but given a choice between working at a good job or staying at home and watching TV, most people are going to choose doing a good job, especially older people.
We derive meaning from it.
I spent 20 years at Trader Joe's, 33 years in tech, had a lot of meaning from it. You can still see I'm very technical. I kept up on it. So that's just, the world's a-changing.
So to bring it back a little bit to the work that you're doing, just quickly want to talk a little bit about, the power of, whether it's someone early, in their career path, and maybe they've done some really interesting things, or just have, some life story to share. And especially folks as they are aging that are looking into, how do they parlay their experience into their own personal brand and really bring it full circle to their trajectory. And that's what, I think the opportunity to work with someone like yourself can really bring is, being able to share that story. So talk a little about that, and then feel free to dive into some of the business acumen from your experience in that business that can help, a new author really be successful in that.
Well, what a book does in the business sense is for example, there are all these younger people coming out of college and they want to find jobs, and they're finding the best job they can get at McDonald's, which is very sad because I think they got conned by these people who want to get the $100,000 loans, and they took liberal arts classes instead of something that actually can help them get a career. But that's a whole different topic, can of worms. So they're there out of college and they want to find a job. How do you differentiate yourself from everybody else? Well, let's look at coaches. Coaches, a lot of people are becoming coaches now because they just got laid off. What do you do when you're laid off? Well, you need money now. What's the way to get money? Well, I can sell an hour of my time for $300 because I was a mid-level manager or a high-level manager or something. So I'm going to become a coach. Sounds easy. Except there's a lot of coaches. A lot of people with the same idea. Well, how do you become the one that people call? You write a book. And how do you know that that's true? Just look at the coaches who are making it. Virtually all of them have a book. Why did they write a book? Because now they can say, I'm the coach who knows what he's doing, and here's my book to prove it. Well, if you're a young kid coming out of college, carve out a little of money and get a book written or write it yourself. And it doesn't have to be long. And now you can say, this is what I do and this is what I do well, and I have the book to prove it. Now you go to your jobs, and they say, so what are your credentials? And say, well, here's my book. And my book, you're going in as an apprentice or whatever. I don't know, whatever the young people are going, whatever you choose, here's my book that tells you all about what I do. And it's not a resume. It's much, much more than that. It's got stories and it's got all kinds of stuff, stuff happened in college and stuff you grew up with. I could work with them and spin a whole bunch of nice tales that are true but very dramatic about their life and how it pertains to what they're doing, how they worked with others in college, how they were on certain teams, and they did certain things, and how this makes them team members, and how they led things, all these things that they did in school that help them prove themselves. And a book can do that. It puts you ahead of everybody else. It's not a guarantee, but it does put you ahead, gives you a leg up. And it's not going to be that expensive. If you came to me, we wouldn't make a long book. It'd be a nice short one, and maybe make a long one later. If you're a coach, you definitely want a book. And if you're a C-level person or a VP or something, or maybe even a director, and you're switching careers, or you just want to prepare for it, get a book.
Now, the business is a lot different nowadays compared to even 10 years ago or maybe 15 years ago, right? So, what are some of the, factors that go into actually getting the book out there, getting into the marketplace, and, getting it published and getting it in people's hands?
Well, the first thing to remember is your book's a tool. It's a marketing tool. It's not something you're going to sell on Amazon, tons of copies of. It's something that you're going to use to get speaking engagements. So you're going to send that out to people who do that. So you're going to send it to Oprah Winfrey. I'm just naming a name. Or you're going to send it to people who do that, like your podcast. So they should send you the book and say, I need to be on your podcast, and here's my book. And you're going to go, it's a pretty good book. And you say, sure, come on, tell me about it. That might be a way to get in. Or you're going to use it in that manner in all areas. New employers, tell them you got a book, put it on your resume. I wrote a book on this subject. You're going into AI. Well, I wrote a book on AI. And here's my theory and stuff. I said, well, I did a PhD. I did a dissertation. Yeah, dissertation is academic. I'm talking about something in business people, not academia. If I'm a business person, yeah, it's very impressive to have a PhD. But if it's going to be better to have something that talks about ROI, returns on investment. Those are the same thing, and KPIs and all the other business terms that probably aren't in a PhD, and it won't be written in academic style. It'll be written in business style. That's the main difference between that. And you put it together. And if you did a dissertation, you could work with somebody like me as a book coach or as a ghostwriter, and we could whip one out. And you'd have something that actually makes you look really, really good to business people, not something to brag about to fellow academics. That's what we're going to do.
That story builds the relationship.
You're building a relationship, and you're building in. It's know, like, and trust, and they're going to know you from the book. They're going to like you because they like what you've written, and then they're going to start to trust you. If you can get in know, like, and trust, get all three of those in, you're ahead of everybody else in the queue.
Awesome. Well, I think that's actually a really great quote to leave us off at. I want to thank you, Richard, for joining us today and sharing your experience and insights with us. Thank you, Scott, for joining us on this. And this is Interchain Live, and look forward to folks listening in, and look to the show notes for some opportunities to learn a little bit more about what Richard offers and how to take advantage of those services.
SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast is a production of M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com.